fainted. The bee was in a coma. Words dusted over and died. Becky moved away from my typewriter. Oh well, it was only fun anyway, only a goof. Every morning, I'd walk a mile and a bit through California fog to my silent school. I only cried once. This next poem is it's more political. It's about migration and immigration. It's a true story. It's called Codex Luna. Codex being the Aztec texts, and Luna, if you don't speak Spanish, means moon. So the Codex of the moon. My moon pulled a different darkness across the sky. My unknown sisters, tucked in the barbed embrace of the border fence, saw a different face in the moon. Theirs was Lunatochtli, the rabbit moon, moon of running, fear, hiding. My bed was soft. Their beds were stone. My moon was origami, floating in a water cup, a Japanese artwork of rice paper and pearls, a light to dream of girlfriends. Their moon peeled a panicked eye, goggled blind as they ran. Headlights froze them. Twin moonbeams ran them down. Tufts of their dreams tangled in thickets of border tumbleweeds. My sisters brought undocumented scents to sweeten the valleys. Their perfume settled on roadsides, misted over bloodstains, rattlesnake, boot print, guard dog, flashlight. Illegal exhalations, unlawful breathing, tainted with cinnamon, coffee, filling cries like sugar in the bellies of honeysuckle. Underarm sweat from running, belly sweat, back of the neck sweat, brow sweat, behind them, hunger, before them, night, thigh sweat, tang of terror under their skirts, smell of hope, burning like mustard blossoms in the caves, burning stink of running, death smells of squatting where they hoped no one could see them, fertilizer, lemons, black soap, fresh hair, flagged in the wire. Sun smell of underpants once hung in the wind. Heavy, hopeless breast milk smell. Smell of Morelos gardens, still in blouses. Burning stink of running. 2. I did not need to run. I had a paper moon, stamped and certified. Mine was a colonia moon, a barrio moon, a suburban moon. I knew where I was supposed to be, where I was allowed to go, and that was anywhere. We lived the outhouse moon, the tortilla moon, the Channel 12 bullfight Tijuana moon, and then we migrated north like monarchs following the light, and my moon was a Boy Scout moon, a camp-out moon, a drive-in triple feature movie moon. My moon remained poor as a rusted coin in a frozen pond, but documented. The green men in the tan trucks could read my belongings by this moon's light, gave us all clear to walk, work, die on ground our ancestors had forgotten. Let us don Bat Patrol patches and Troop 260 uniforms and hike the ridge lines where the Mexica had taken Huitzilopochtli in their arms and begun their 100-year walk to the south. My moon rose over tidy houses. 3. She ran. She ran all her life. She ran to stay ahead of charging darkness, galloping hunger. She ran west to El Poniente, north toward winter and Mictlan, the land of the dead, worked the light of the moon in her small hands, the color of earth. She molded moon glow into trinkets, traded for perfume. Worked the ceremonial motel chambers, swept the floors of the moneyed, folded bloody sheets, and knelt at toilets, scrubbing sins of the mighty from their seats. Everyone moving north. She was 13. Maklakli Iwanye. I was 10. Maklakli. Somehow she came to rest in my house. Trucks could not track her for 1 hour. Dogs could not follow her scent. She was on that invisible railroad to Los Angeles, enemy city of the great walled city of Tijuana. I was in the invisible mountains of Cuyamaca, walking in the ghost footprints of vanished hunters in their tribes, wondering where their arrows went. And she slept in my bed. Too tired to eat or join in the gathered laughter of my living room, she slept in my bed. She lay in my sheets, smelling the odor of Thunderbird and America, and her eyes pulled themselves close to protect her. Dreams of home. 4. I came in and found her. I came in and found her. Is there any other story? Any other legends to tell? I came home. I found her. Her head on my pillow. The first woman to ever sleep in my bed. Her hair black across my pillow, spilling toward earth, reaching for the heart of Se Anahuac, the one world. Her eyebrows shallow as streams fringed in crest, and licorice in Cuyamaca shadows. Her brown brow unlined, one hand, fingers curled, nails pale small shells against the Chichimeca shore of her skin. Her breath making small melodies of breezes and tides, and me holding my breath. The thrum and sigh, thrum and sigh, thrum and sigh of her sleep. 5. Then they woke her. She didn't want to wake. She didn't want to rise. She didn't want to go. I didn't want them to wake her. I wanted to sleep beside her. I didn't know anything else that men wanted to happen in a bed with a woman. I wanted to sleep beside her. I did not know the language of beds. I wanted to pass through the door of her color. I wanted to pray in her temple of hair. She knew more than I did about this new language. She blushed when she saw me at worship. I blushed, discovered in my beholding. We touched hands. Hello. We touched hands. Adios. Then they tucked her in the back seat of a 1964 car, smuggled her under blankets through trucks, up freeways laden with runners, north, where she'd bask in the light of 1,000 toilets, where her nails would break on the porcelain, where she'd sweep more sheets off more beds, where she could not afford to sleep, where helicopters searched her alleys with burning eyes all night, where she could speak to no one and no one could speak to her, except to give her orders. Girlie, get your ass over here and wipe this up. You come when I tell you, and you do it now. You have papers? Do you like this? You do, don't you? You like this. I'll teach you a little something right here and now. That night, I lay in her outline in my sheets. She was hot as sunburn on the cotton. I sank my face into the imprint of hers. Her perfume crept from the pillow, the smell of her memories. I smelled her mother in a kitchen with clay pots and cilantro on her hands. It was all there. It is still there. Hibiscus, tea, a river, a handful of shampoo falling to a drain like melting snowdrifts. First grade, the Mexican anthem, the snap of the flag, chalk dust sneezes, smell of library pace, village church, incense, the crack of unopened Bibles freeing their musk, laundry day, the boiling, tamale day, and the ants with their crow voice laughter, the meat, the masa, the raisins, the cinnamon, morning glory vines all tangled through cheap Tijuana perfume. Just an illegal drudge in crepuscular rain. If you see her, protect her. Revere her, my unknown sister. Light candles in her honor, you travelers. She is the mother of my race. So we have a daughter named Rosario, named after my godmother. And her middle name is Teresa, named after my great aunt, who was a Yaqui saint and revolutionary leader named Teresita. So this is a poem a little lighter. It's not as painful as the last one, but it's called Letter to My Daughter, written when she was 3. Rosario, this endless season is so brief. Once in Oklahoma midnight, on the road for days, halfway down the highway home, I walked out to keep watch on the Milky Way, visible for the first time since I'd cared to notice. You have to be vigilant with God at every turn, even if God does not exist. That's your choice. You can't let God get away with anything, because you are the silent partner in this world making. So, at first that star smear above looked like electric smoke or some prairie fire backlit by the steer horn moon. You know, it looked like a restless river of milk spilled across dark meridians where you flew down to us. I was footloose on a gravel road like a homesteader on stolen dirt, walking the same direction as the Sky River, just not as far. Though I bet the ants on that road thought it about the size of heaven itself, and I was some thunder lizard. It was hay fields and frog ponds, the world. Deer stole sunflowers at night. Barbed wire drooped loose and sang in prairie winds like harps. I wore sandals that later I would wear, walking you down a desert gorge to a red river, and on the way back stood with your mother under a hanging garden that wept delicious water on our heads in benediction. Inside the Grand Canyon once, I had decided, should you ever come, to write this letter to you. I sat on the oldest stone on earth, shared water and lunch with Mexicans. You should know this. We find each other, no matter where we are. Struggled back up, unable, I believed, to go on, until lightning taught me different. Daughter, when you can't anymore, you discover that you have a mile uphill run still within you. It's funny, the mysteries you will decipher long after I am gone, too far and too long to hear what you have discovered. But know that your presence makes the world sacred. Look, even Oklahoma spiders in the holy cottonwoods were the size of your pink hands, colored bright as bananas and turquoise rings, and they played their webs hung from low branches like flamenco guitarists right above the choke cherries, arms thrown open to the winds. Look, ducks slumbering in invisible ponds were still reflected in black shine. Look, there was as much gravel on this nameless road as there were stars in that celestial patch where you descended to us. How could I have known that a light shaped like you, too small to be seen, saw us from above, clothed in mysteries that would always be hidden, had been blinked from God's dark eye, my child, my daughter, to lead what will remain of us when we have been summoned away from you for a week or two, back home. And written on Easter Sunday. This one is shorter. It's about being working people. My father was a blue-collar worker. He didn't want to be. He had been an officer in the Mexican army. My mother had been a nurse in World War II. They hoped for a better life. I guess I ended up getting it. But it's called Insomnia Machine. What is that engine coiled in cables and red hoses that lurches at the darkest hour as it pumps, churns, desire and nightmares out the main line, sends hot want into the alley down the hall, in the window as it rusts itself, keeps us awake all night, like a motel neon sign in the rain, pounds to death, that working machine that makes us weep, that imagines God, that drives the pistons that slog in hollow graveyard shifts, that dynamo that suddenly snaps and wrenches itself apart as we shout, human beings once called it a heart. This is for my beloved wife, Cinderella, believe it or not. It's called Love Song. When I have gone to snow on the far side of the hill, and this evil age takes breath to hunt sweet flesh of poetry, where will you go? When I have gone to snow on the far side of the hill, what Zapata will ride thunder up the alleys of this city, shooting from the hip to defend you? Woman, I will lay these lines around you. I will paint your tongue with songs. When I have gone to snow on the far side of the hill, as every child will, what new man will light his bones into a bonfire for you? What new man will come to keep you warm? It's a poem I wrote for the Native American poet and novelist Sherman Alexie. He's a dear friend of ours. It's called Help Me. I'm very interested in work and all the million jobs I've had before I'm lucky enough to speak to my Russian friends on the satellite. But it's called Help Me, and this happened one day. And it always haunted me. I had to write about it. If you're a poet, I think you write about hauntings. Maybe it's a ghost, all of them are ghost stories. Help me for Sherman. 100 bad jobs before one poem published. Another lunch break, another greasy paper bag with another bologna and cheese sandwich. Invisible to women, not enough money in my pocket to get robbed. Public toilet on an otherwise heartless California day. An empty wheelchair in the middle of the room. From a stall, a voice. Hey, guy. He was twisted on the seat, pants around his ankles, in a cloud of stink. Help me. I'm late. Been here for a while. Sure, I said. How? I said. I can't get my pants up. That's, I said. Okay, how? I bent to him and pulled up his underpants, pulled up his corduroy pants, pulled up his zipper, did the button on his pants, even affixed his belt. He leaned on my shoulder, skinny as a kite. At least you didn't have to wipe me, guy. We waltzed somehow to his chair, and I set him in it. Woo, he said. Woo, I said. Sorry. No, man, no. Then he cried, my lunch. I went back in the stall, his lunch in a greasy paper bag, just like mine. Mom made it, he said. I can't forget it. I grabbed it. Mom had put a banana in there. I felt his entire life in my hand. His morning, his birthday, his Christmas, his bedtime. Man, he said, have a good day and thank you. I broke out into the sun, walking, squinting. Too much sunlight out there. And I went back to work forever. This one is kind of confessional. It's sort of self-explanatory. It's called The Gospel of the Birds. I can tell you we're friends. I've recently had cancer surgery. They cut my throat, took some bad stuff out. I've never had things like that happen in my life. And well, you'll see the poem's self-explanatory. It's about lying in bed next to your beloved. The Gospel of the Birds. And I'm not preaching, but there's a text from Job from the Old Testament that I love. But ask the animals and they will teach you, or the birds in the sky and they will tell you. Suddenly awake before the blind red eye of dawn has opened, wet across your throat, your chest, the hollows of your collarbone, small pools of what might be water, and your thought again is sutures, and you rise so as not to disturb the one who loves you or all the others in your house who fear the word that rhymes with dancer, and who, in their own ways, have borne the siege beside you. So you creep into the bathroom, alien now in its dull comforts and hated mirrors from which an old man you do not know stares back wearily, and you see blood and your body's wine spilling from a fresh mouth in your throat. And you don't know what is happening now. So much has already happened, and your hand shakes and you're ashamed of this childlike terror, and the beloved dead you call out to for help might be with you and might not. And you fashion a nest for this cascade from toilet paper, and you gather your clothes in the dark and creep downstairs to wake no one, hand to your traitor throat like some heroine in a silent movie. But then violence. A bird crashes into your big window, hard as a thrown rock, while the sky purls. You can just see it falling on the bricks. You open the door and step out. The bricks are cold, and he lies at your feet, on his side, white chest and piebald splayed like a discarded paper kite. You bend to him, and he suddenly resurrects, his head bending back to you, mouth open, eyes blink as blind as dawn. You let go of your throat and cup him, hot in your tainted hands. He doesn't fight, but you want him to live more than anything in the world. You want him warm and strong, and his ragged claw finds you in the nest of your hands and clutches your wedding ring finger, and you pull him to your chest and whisper hope to him, and he relaxes, and suddenly his two-stroke heart astounds you with its powerful beat. Alive, 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 alive. Ferocious. There. Alive, alive, alive. Your shirt collar is wet. The sky above is brightening. Birds have come to the garden as if seeking him, but you know that's just a prayer. And when you open your hands, he is whole. He leaps into the light. He lands in your maple tree that your daughter christened once as King Ralph. And you hold a fresh pad to your throat and climb softly to your sleeping bride to tell her, before she sees the blood, about the wounded bird who chose anyway to keep singing. That's it. Thank you for listening. And if there are any questions or comments, I'll try to answer them.
Please, thank you so much for your poetry. Thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. I'll start with, you mentioned several like details about your life, that you come from a working class family, and that you worked many jobs before you kind of like we got the pleasure of hearing you. So can you share a little bit of your journey of becoming a writer or a poet?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I loved to read, but I think it might have been through music at first. I loved all the songwriters. I loved Jim Morrison. I love Bob Dylan, of course, and Leonard Cohen, all those songwriters. And I remember I used to go to the bookstore a lot. I told you there was a bookstore that sold meter books from Moscow. I thought, wow, I'm going to get in trouble for buying this. And I saw on the shelf a book of Jim Morrison poems. And next to it, Leonard Cohen. And next to that, John Lennon. And then Bob Dylan, Tarantula. I thought, wait, what? And I think you believe that it's magic, right? Jim Morrison just put on leather pants and started doing his thing. And I opened these books, and some of Jim Morrison's poems were 1 or 2 words long. And I thought, oh, I can do that. And Leonard Cohen, anyway, books were very cheap then, not so now. And I did chores around the house, and I had jobs. Even when I was a little kid, I used to work in a donut shop making donuts. It was a terrible job. I had to walk about 1.5 miles down there, and then 1.5 miles back up the hill I lived on. So I felt sorry for myself all the time, but I had some money, and I would do chores for my parents for a little money. And so I started buying some of these books, and that the combination of that, I think, and listening, especially to Leonard Cohen, I thought there's something magical I don't understand. And I loved to read, and I loved to read science fiction at that time.
Mhm.
And I had a brother, a half brother. My father had families, plural. Muy mexicano, my father. Um, but one of my half brothers was learning English by reading science fiction books,
Mhm.
and he would send the paperbacks to me with my father. So I was, Ray Bradbury, all those kind of writers fascinated me. Um, and I just became the one that wrote. And I did not think that Mexicans or Mexican Americans published work. It wasn't part of the culture at that time
Mhm.
for to have heroes, spoke Spanish. But I learned again through music. So, singers, songwriters from Spain and Colombia and Mexico. My half brothers brought me records, and I thought, wow. So I felt like I had discovered something that nobody else knew about.
I think I read somewhere that you have your poetry, or like you as a writer have this rock and roll feel. I guess I know where that's coming from.
Well, you'll appreciate this. So all of my friends, were working class kids like me. And they weren't very literary, but they were good musicians. So I began writing lyrics for my friends.
That's amazing. I think it feels wonderful to hear your poetry in someone's song, I guess. You know better. There is a question for you in the chat, but unfortunately, I don't think I'm able to read it. But I think you would be because it's written in Spanish.
Oh,
Yeah.
let me see if I can see it. I put on my glasses. Let's see.
Sure.
Um, have you been writing in Spanish? Or do you prefer only English? Is that the one?
Yeah, there is one that it starts in Spanish. So
See.
your poems sound incredibly interesting. Have you been writing in Spanish, or do you prefer only English?
This is interesting. I think you'll appreciate this. It became Spanish for a time for me was so sacred that I was afraid to write in Spanish because I thought I'm so Americanized by being raised in Southern California, um, that I was nervous about it because, the writers in Spanish are,
Oh yeah.
it's incredible. And so that was a legacy that I didn't know how to approach, but I couldn't help myself after a while, and it started to happen. But many of the things I write, if you see my prose, my novels are often about Mexican issues, and everything that happened in those books happened in Spanish. So I had to translate those books into English that felt like Spanish. It was a weird alchemy, but it was good for me as a writer, to find a voice that I felt was mine. Um,
Mhm.
and now I write in both, and I enjoy it very much. Um,
That's beautiful. And in your bio, it says that you are mostly recognized as a border writer. What does it mean to you to be a border writer? Like, what do you kind of like put into this term?
uh, I don't really know, but I realized that I didn't have a place that I felt my feet belonged. I was born in Tijuana. We lived on a dirt street called Rampa Independencia, the Ramp of Independence. Good
Cool.
revolutionary.
Yeah.
And but it was a neighborhood uh, annihilated by poverty and diseases. I had tuberculosis and all the stuff that my parents are both ashamed of. My mother came from society people in New York City. The last woman on earth that should be living in a dirt alley in Tijuana was my mother, Phyllis Dashiell McLaughlin. She had been in World War II at the Red Cross and was injured terribly, and had I think suffered nightmares, and I don't know. She had the misfortune of meeting my father, who was very charming, and he was, I mean, look at me. I don't look like a Mexican. I look Irish. And that's because my grandmother, my father's mother, was named Guadalupe McMurray. So she was an Irish Mexican with red hair, blue eyes. And my mother fell for my dad's charm and I think found herself by surprise on this street in Tijuana. So when I got so ill, people were dying all around us. I was in really bad shape, and they were forced to move to the United States. But the only place they could settle was a barrio, a kind of a ghetto neighborhood. And I think it was just, I think I had a strong urge to escape. And there was nowhere I was going to escape to because I didn't have any money, but I did have, these words. So I escaped into the words, and later on, and then I'll stop. But I was the first to go to college, which was a miracle, through my mother's perseverance. I was too lazy. I wanted to just write rock and roll songs with my friends. But I went to college, and during my college years, my father died violently in Mexico. And it was very difficult for me. And I wrote a story about it because I didn't know what else to do. And the famous science fiction author Ursula K. Le Guin came to my campus, and my professor took the story to Le Guin. And,
wow.
And she asked to meet me.
That's unbelievable.
I can't meet her. I can't do it. And they said, you've got to do it. She wants to meet you. And went to her apartment. And so for science fiction fans, she was very tiny. And she smoked a pipe. And she drank whiskey, like a highball. And when I knocked on her door, she opened the door. And this little elf greets me smoking a pipe. And she says, Luisito. And I thought, oh, my God. And she started my career.
That's I don't know. As a poet, as a human being, it's such a compliment. Ursula Le Guin wants to meet you after reading your story.
A hero. And she changed me for life. I mean, I have an essay about her I should send you, but I got to take her to see Star Wars the first time she saw it. And it was hilarious because she was correcting all the science. She would lean over. And she's the one who told me. I was 22 years old, a California boy. And she said to me one day, Luisito, it's time for us to become feminists. I said, what? What do I do? And she said, from now on, for the rest of your college career, you will take women's literature courses. I said, okay, I will. Okay.
That's a wonderful story. It's like you're wrapped in so many stories around you, and
it's crazy.
Yeah. And you look like a very cheerful person. And there was a question actually from the audience, a sentence prior to the meeting. Have you ever felt despair and hopelessness on your creative professional path? And how often have you had such moods, or never? What advice can you give people who are struggling with such thoughts?
I had that this morning when I got out of bed. It's just not really, but of course, it's it's a very difficult road to walk. And I realize that I have been blessed by companions who are walking that road, or I don't want to say fans, readers. And, we have a very profound relationship with each other. And that's fabulous. And, I have a happy family. I have great children. I have a grandson. Got too many dogs. I've got a house that's comfortable. All those material things help because, I think we have some raw nerves that are exposed, and cold winds and hot sun get to them. And, at the end of the day, it's just you at your desk with your pen, your notebook, or your laptop, and you have to face those shadows. But I think the blessings, the the miracles outweigh the pain ultimately. I hope. It's no accident that so many writers become alcoholics or commit suicide. It's difficult. And it's not just because we're very precious. I just think, it's almost like Greek mythology. You're going and touching the sun. You're taking some of the sun, and you have to be prepared for it. But there are a lot of wonderful fellow travelers, and I can tell you that now that you know about my upbringing, I could not believe that my heroes would have open arms and say, "Come on, come in." And to have people that I admire so much be some of my best friends now, people you can trust, people who have changed your life, hundreds of them. That's the best thing that's ever happened, aside from marrying Cinderella.
One can feel from your poems that you have a very fond relationship with your wife and your family. Kind of like, there is I read somewhere that the goal of the poem is to kind of like make the reader feel as if your friend is their friend. And I think through your poetry, one can feel this love that you have for your wife.
Well,
And that's beautiful.
That's good. Writing is prayer at the end of the day. Even if you're not religious, you know what you're praying to. There's something beyond us, and to touch it is incredible. Like when I started reading Facelia, I was like, wow, this guy's my friend. Yevtushenko, when I read him, I thought, whoa, what a rock star. So there's a new friend in every book if you're open to it, a new teacher.
Wonderful. And speaking of books and friends in every book, you you write prolifically of prose and poetry. And does your process or the way you write or the way you kind of prepare yourself for writing change when you write poetry and when you write fiction or like prose?
Yes, it does. And I being a working class boy, I thought being a writer was like carrying your toolbox to the factory, right? And I thought, well, we have to try everything and do the best we can in every genre, every discipline. I could not believe when I got to college that there were people who were so pretentious. I went in the 70s, and so and this is not a comment about my sisters and brothers who are poets who may be watching, but at that time in Southern California, the poets wore black turtlenecks, and some of them had berets, and they held their cigarettes like this. They looked like a little cartoon, like a Pink Panther movie, and they would actually pronounce it poets, poets, poets. And I thought, you're a surfer from Southern California. What are you talking? You're a poet. But they, everybody was specialized, everybody. And so it turned out that what I was a little embarrassed about, my ethos was, I have my toolbox and I've been working with every tool trying to get them all. I didn't know I could just be a poet. I didn't know I could just hold a cigarette sideways and tell people I was a poet. That wasn't good enough for me. I wanted to do the thing. And again, it really is a kind of form of prayer for me. And, I can tell you over and over again, I'd pick up some poetry and lose my mind. Pablo Neruda, I thought, what is this? But I would pick up prose and lose my mind. Garcia Marquez, what is that? Essays I loved. It's all of a piece for me, and I really enjoy doing it. And I try to, I published a book that's been very successful novel called Goodnight, Irene, about World War II. My mother was, in the Red Cross. And it took many years and much travel to write it. But I tried to cover the basis. So I at the same time did a major piece for the National Geographic about an immigrant family in Chicago, and I did a book of poetry. So I want to try to always keep all three alive. We'll see. I'm getting tired now. Now that I'm old, forget it.
And can you like you very often mention poets that kind of like, surprise you in a great ways, or like kind of like take your breath away. Can you recommend any contemporary poets or writers that you think are amazing? Or like, I mean, probably there is many of them, but you've recently kind of like read or encountered.
Sister. Yes, Jane Hirshfield. Jane Hirshfield blows me away. There's something so mysterious and beautiful in her work. I highly recommend it. She also has good books about writing that are life-changing. She's of Jewish descent, but she's actually a practicing Zen Buddhist. I know. It's wonderful. What a combination. And I have hero worship of writers, and I was at a place where she was, and all my students, I was teaching workshops, they knew that I was a super fan. And they kept saying, "Are you going to go talk to Jane?" I said, "You don't talk to Jane." They're like, "What's wrong with you? Why not?" I said, "That's Jane. Why? I don't talk to Jane." And I had to do a reading, and she was sitting in the front watching. And I was like, "Oh my God, this is, and she came up to me and she said, "Why didn't you say hello to me?" I said, "You're Jane Hirshfield, man. I can't say hello to you." And she said the most wonderful thing. She said, "You know what we need to do? We need to get 2 notebooks, 2 pens, and buy a ticket on a Greyhound bus and drive across America just writing everything we see together." I was like, yeah. That's the best comment I've ever gotten from anybody. So
You should definitely do that. That would be and document the adventure.
Exactly. And I know she didn't mean it, but it was the perfect thing to say, But yeah, she's a fabulous.
Maybe that's just one email away.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And there is a question in the chat. How many hours a day do you actually dedicate to writing? And is there a certain maybe norm or routine that you stick to?
La Cinderella is laughing over there. I try to avoid it. I try to get out of it as much as possible. I get up and I think, "Oh yeah, a little coffee. Let's do that. Oh no, I need some breakfast. Oh, look what's on the news. Oh, there's a show I missed." I try to do that. Then I think, "Oh, maybe I'll walk the dog or go out in the yard, or if it's nice weather, let's look at the plants." And then I postpone it as long as possible, because I know once I get there, I'm going to be, in the grips of what I'm doing all day. And
Wow.
and there are times when I have written so long that I can't get out of my chair very well. I really am. I'm all hunched over like, Quasimodo, because I get so into it. So I try to escape my duties. uh, and I like to write to music. A lot of writers I know need silence. I don't. I think.
Oh wow, that's very unusual.
Is it? It's very loud. They always know when I'm writing because Nine Inch Nails or Respighi, the composer, is on, but it's a gift to me. I think it's a cave that closes the world out. Because, I've told this story on book tour, but a lot of your time as a writer is spent like this.
Looks good.
Just looking out. Well, let me have some more coffee. And my poor daughter, Rosario, Cindy sends her upstairs to get me for supper or whatever. And I'll be sitting there listening to the doors drinking coffee, staring up at the ceiling. And she comes in and says, "Dad, supper's ready." And I yell at her, "Don't you see I'm working?" But it's always going. It's always going. And I think everything, if you are in league with your art, I think everything you do is your art or is reflected in your art. And I've been accused of writing epics, but I think they're very tiny. My longest books, I always say, are several thousand haiku poems in a row. You just don't notice.
Like a true poet divides fiction by haiku. All right.
Yeah.
And Luis, what that will be my last question for today. What is can you share with us what projects are you working on at the moment, and what publications should we expect in the future?
Why, yes. I've owed a collected poems to a press for years. And about every 2 years, they say, "How about those collected poems?" So I think I'm going to put that together. But I'm working on my next novel. It's called The Zebras of Tijuana. And I've got to tell you, something happened when I wasn't looking. And Tijuana has become a megalopolis with skyscrapers and beautiful parks. And I thought, what happened? And so it's a very cosmopolitan city all of a sudden. And there are people from all over Europe living there. And of course, all the migrants living there now, Chinese people, all kinds of people, and Haitians, and the great valley where the wineries are. There are Russian vintners there. It's like it's this cosmopolitan world all of a sudden, and it's beautiful, or becoming beautiful. And I suddenly realized I was on a tour with UNESCO, where we had been in deep Mexico, and then they sent each one of us to a different part of Mexico. And of course, they thought, well, he's from Tijuana, let's send him home. And when I flew into the Tijuana airport and I saw the skyscrapers, and I thought, wait, what happened? So the Zebras is this crazy thing that they started doing in the 1930s, maybe, that to attract tourists, somebody had a great idea. They have donkey carts where you take pictures of you wearing a stupid big sombrero. But somebody got the crazy idea to paint the donkeys to look like zebras. And they actually have a name, a folk name, which is Zonky, a zebra donkey. And so I started thinking about that, the Zebras of Tijuana. And one of my friends had posted, he's a cultural writer, and he'd posted something saying, "Don't you know, we are the zonkies. We are painted donkeys, we who live here." And I thought, wow, what? So I'm trying to figure out a kind of a fable about the new Tijuana and what it means. Because I was always proud of Tijuana, but I never knew that I think it's the laboratory for the future of the United States. That's how I feel right now.
Wow, amazing. And we're looking forward to seeing these books on the shelves.
I'll send it.
Wonderful. And thank you, Luis, for this opportunity to host you tonight, to hear your poetry and to talk to you.
So much.
And American Center in Moscow for organizing the event. And thanks to the great audience for the questions. And please fill out the survey. And until we meet again. Thank you.
Thank you.